My son humiliated us at his wedding. Until he learned who really owned his life. My son stared at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into the wrong building. Not angry. Not emotional. Worse than that. Calm. You and Mom shouldn't be here, he said quietly, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive black suit. After today, I need distance from this part of my life. Those words hit harder than any scream ever could. Outside the private hallway, the wedding orchestra played softly while guests laughed beneath crystal chandeliers. Cameras flashed. Waiters carried trays of champagne through the grand estate like everything in the world was exactly as it should be. And maybe for everyone else, it was. But in that moment, standing there with a wedding envelope damp from the sweat in my hand, I realized my son had just erased us from his future. Alice stood beside me, frozen. She didn't hear every word clearly, but she saw enough. A mother always does. Harrison, she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he glanced toward a security guard waiting nearby in a dark suit. The message was obvious. We were no longer family here. We were a problem that needed to disappear quietly before the ceremony began. Alice had spent days preparing for this wedding. She stitched the loose hem on her blue dress herself because she wanted to look proper. She packed sandwiches for the drive because she hated wasting money at gas stations. We had left before sunrise and driven nearly 10 hours just to watch our son begin a new chapter of life. And now we were being escorted out before it even started. Then Victoria appeared. Elegant. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. The kind of woman who knew exactly how powerful appearances could be. Her eyes traveled slowly over Alice's old shoes before stopping at the envelope in my wife's trembling hands. A gift, she asked lightly. Alice nodded. Just something small. A blessing for you both. Victoria took the envelope. Then tore it cleanly in half. Right in front of us. This wedding has standards, she said softly. We're trying to keep things tasteful. I looked at Harrison. My son didn't defend us. Didn't move. Didn't even look ashamed. That hurt more than the insult itself. I placed a hand on Alice's shoulder before she could speak because I knew if she opened her mouth, she would cry. And I refused to let those people turn my wife's heartbreak into background entertainment for their luxury wedding. So we left. No arguments. No dramatic scene. Just silence. As the giant ballroom doors closed behind us, applause erupted inside. The ceremony had begun. Without the parents of the groom. We drove for almost an hour before I finally pulled into a roadside fast food restaurant. Not because we were hungry. Because I couldn't breathe properly yet. Alice sat across from me, turning a cup of ice water slowly in her hands. Maybe we failed somewhere, she whispered. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I had already started realizing something much deeper was wrong. I opened the old laptop I kept in the trunk of my car. Alice looked surprised. What are you doing? Checking something. But I wasn't checking. I was remembering. For 30 years, my son believed we were ordinary people living an ordinary life in a quiet town. That was intentional. I never wanted Harrison growing up spoiled by wealth or hidden behind a family name. I wanted him to understand work, discipline, humility. What he never knew was that the estate company behind half the luxury developments he admired belonged to our family. Blackwood Holdings. A name I buried years ago because I hated what it did to people. I inherited control after my father passed, but instead of living publicly, I stepped away. Quiet clothes. Quiet house. Quiet life. Alice knew we were comfortable financially, but even she didn't know the scale of it. I preferred it that way. Money changes people long before they actually touch it. As the laptop screen flickered to life, old records appeared one by one. Trust accounts. Property holdings. Corporate structures. Then I saw something interesting. The penthouse where Harrison and Victoria were living in downtown Chicago technically belonged to one of my holding groups. I leaned back slowly. Not angry. Just awake now. For the first time since the wedding, things began making sense. Victoria never cared about family. She cared about elevation. The first time we met, she asked what I used to do for work before she asked anything about who I was. She analyzed people the way investors analyze risk. At the time, I ignored it. Now I regretted that. Over the next few weeks, I started quietly looking deeper into Harrison's life. Old habits from my years working investigations never really disappear. You learn how to observe patterns. How to notice what people try too hard to hide. And Victoria was hiding something. Everywhere Harrison appeared publicly, she was there beside him smiling like the perfect wife. But privately? Different story. Different meetings. Different schedules. Different company. An old professional contact helped verify what I already suspected. Victoria had been seeing another man for months. Not secretly for romance. Strategically. The man happened to be one of the largest financial partners connected to Harrison's company. That's when the entire structure became visible. Victoria was positioning Harrison to absorb future financial fallout while she secured her own exit. Contracts had been manipulated carefully. Liabilities shifted quietly. His signature sat in dangerous places he barely understood. My son thought he was climbing into elite circles. In reality, he was being guided toward a cliff. And the most painful part? She had convinced him his parents were holding him back. I found messages. Carefully written conversations planting doubt piece by piece. Your parents don't understand ambition. They'll embarrass you. They want you small. Eventually Harrison stopped seeing us as family and started seeing us as obstacles. That hallway confrontation at the wedding suddenly made perfect sense. He wasn't rejecting us entirely on his own. He had been coached into it. I sat alone in my study late one night staring at the evidence glowing across my screen. Not furious. Just disappointed in how easy it is to manipulate someone desperate to belong somewhere higher. Alice walked in carrying tea. Did you find something? Yes, I said quietly. But not everything should be said immediately. She nodded. That's how we survived marriage this long. Knowing when silence protects more than words. I had two choices. Expose everything instantly and destroy Harrison emotionally. Or protect him first. I chose protection. Quietly, through intermediaries, I began buying the debt tied to Harrison's business obligations. Layer by layer. Legally. Invisibly. No one noticed. To them it looked like routine corporate movement. To me, it was building a safety net beneath my son before gravity finally hit him. Then I waited. Because truth works best when people walk into it themselves. A month later, the opportunity arrived. A charity gala at one of Chicago's oldest luxury hotels. Victoria and Harrison would both attend. So would several executives tied to the financial structure I'd been monitoring. Alice didn't want to go. I don't belong in places like that, she said nervously while adjusting her dress. I looked at her gently. This time I told her we're not going to belong. We're going to stand exactly where we should. The ballroom glowed with gold light and polished glass when we arrived. Every surface reflected wealth. Women in silk gowns drifted between tables speaking in practiced laughter, while businessmen exchanged handshakes that looked more like negotiations than greetings. A string quartet played near the staircase beneath a chandelier so large it looked capable of crushing the entire room if it ever fell. Alice held my arm tightly as we entered. I could feel her nervousness through her fingertips. Then I saw Harrison. He stood near the center of the ballroom beside Victoria, smiling for photographs. Confident. Controlled. Exactly the kind of image she wanted beside her. For a brief second, I remembered him at 12 years old wearing a crooked school tie before his first debate competition, asking me 3 times if he looked grown up enough. Now he looked at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. Victoria noticed us first. Her smile faltered. Only for a second. But I saw it. That tiny fracture in her confidence told me she understood something was wrong. Harrison followed her gaze and froze completely. Confusion spread across his face. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Confusion. Because people like us weren't supposed to appear at events like this. Not according to the version of reality Victoria had built around him. A hostess approached immediately and guided Alice and me toward the front section reserved for major donors and honorary guests. Alice stopped walking. I think there's been a mistake, she whispered. There hasn't, I answered calmly. The room slowly settled as the evening program began. Waiters disappeared. Conversations lowered into murmurs. Spotlights turned toward the stage. Then the announcers spoke my name. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But clearly enough that the entire ballroom shifted its attention toward me. I stood. Across the room, Harrison stared in complete disbelief. Victoria's face had lost all color. I walked slowly to the stage while polite applause filled the room. No excitement. No spectacle. Just recognition from people who suddenly realized the quiet older man they ignored carried more influence than they assumed. I adjusted the microphone slightly. My wife and I have always believed, I began, that generosity means very little when it exists only to be seen. The room quieted further. I kept my voice calm, measured. No anger. No revenge. Because real power never needs to shout. I spoke briefly about education programs, housing initiatives, and community projects our foundation had supported quietly over the years. Most people in that room had no idea where much of the funding originated. That was intentional. Then I paused. And tonight, I said gently, I've decided to resolve 2 unfinished matters. I heard chairs shift softly across the ballroom. The first concerns my son. Harrison straightened immediately. I still didn't look directly at him. The residence currently occupied by him has been fully cleared of debt and transferred free of financial burden. A wave of whispers spread instantly. I continued before anyone could react further. The second matter concerns transparency. Now the room became completely silent. I placed a small folder onto the podium. Over the past several weeks, documentation regarding fraudulent financial activity connected to multiple private entities has been submitted to federal authorities and independent investigators. This time, I looked directly toward Victoria. Her expression finally cracked. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to reveal fear. Harrison turned toward her slowly. She refused to meet his eyes. That told him everything. Within moments, several individuals entered quietly through side doors. No sirens. No shouting. Just calm professionals moving with the confidence of people who already possessed all necessary evidence. One of them approached Victoria. She attempted to maintain composure. Attempted. But panic had already started leaking through the edges. Harrison stepped toward her. Victoria, what's happening? She didn't answer. The investigators exchanged a few quiet words before escorting her from the ballroom. Guests pretended not to stare while absolutely everyone stared. The orchestra stopped playing. Conversations died into silence. And my son stood in the center of it all, looking like the ground beneath his life had suddenly disappeared. For the first time in months, he looked young again. Not powerful. Not ambitious. Just lost. Our eyes met across the room. I didn't smile. Didn't nod proudly. I simply looked at him the way a father looks at a child standing in the wreckage of a bad decision. Not with hatred. With sadness. Alice touched my arm softly. Can we go home now? Yes, I said quietly. And we left. No dramatic exit. No celebration. Because none of this felt victorious. In the car, rain tapped gently against the windshield while the city lights blurred across wet streets. Alice stared out the window for a long time before finally asking, "Do you feel better?" I thought carefully before answering. Not better, I admitted. Just honest again. She nodded slowly. That night, neither of us slept much. I sat alone in my study staring at the old safe in the corner of the room. Inside were decades of documents, decisions, responsibilities, and truths I had hidden because I thought secrecy could protect the people I loved. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe children deserve honesty earlier, even when it risks changing them. Or maybe some lessons only arrive through pain. Just before sunrise, headlights appeared through the front window. A car pulled slowly into the driveway. Alice looked outside first. It's Harrison. He stayed on the porch nearly a full minute before knocking. When I opened the door, my son couldn't even meet my eyes. His face looked hollow, exhausted, like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. I didn't know where else to go, he whispered. I stepped aside silently and let him in. The old living room smelled like coffee and rain. Harrison sat on the same couch where he used to fall asleep watching cartoons as a child. Alice brought tea but said very little. Some heartbreaks need room to breathe before words can survive inside them. Then suddenly, Harrison dropped to his knees. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking apart. Dad, I was wrong. I stood immediately. Get up. But he shook his head. No, please let me say this. Tears hit the wooden floor beneath him. She kept telling me you were ashamed of me. That you wanted control. That you thought I'd never become anything important without your help. He swallowed hard. And I believed her because I wanted so badly to belong somewhere bigger. There it was. The truth. Not greed. Not cruelty. Just insecurity manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to use it. I helped him to his feet slowly. Then I looked him directly in the eyes. An apology doesn't erase damage, I told him calmly. It only opens the door to repair. He nodded immediately. I know. I walked to my desk drawer and removed a small set of keys. Harrison stared at them uncertainly. The penthouse is gone, I said. I sold it. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't argue. The money was transferred into charitable programs your mother and I support. Your debts have been resolved. Nobody's coming after you financially anymore. Relief flooded his face for exactly 1 second before I continued. But understand this carefully, Harrison. You are no longer standing on platforms I built quietly beneath you. I placed the keys in his hand. It's a small apartment near the city center. Nothing luxurious. Just enough for a fresh start. His fingers tightened around the keys like they weighed 100 pounds. I'm not giving you comfort, I said softly. I'm giving you another chance to become the man you were supposed to be before you started chasing appearances. Harrison cried harder then. Not loudly. Just honestly. Alice finally walked over and touched his shoulder gently. This family, she whispered, was never meant to be a competition. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The rain outside had stopped completely. In the weeks that followed, Harrison changed more than I expected. He took a smaller job. Stopped attending elite events. Stopped posting carefully edited pieces of his life online like advertisements for happiness. Sometimes healing begins the moment performance ends. Alice and I started traveling quietly after that. Not expensive trips. Just places we had postponed visiting for years while life stayed busy. One evening near Lake Michigan, we stood together watching the sunset stretch gold across the water. The wind moved gently through Alice's hair while boats drifted slowly in the distance. She looked at me and asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought for a long time before answering. Then I shook my head. "Some losses," I said quietly, "are necessary to protect values that cannot be replaced." The sun lowered further across the horizon. And for the first time since that whole way outside my son's wedding, I finally felt peace settle inside me again. Because in the end, family was never about wealth. Never about status. Never about who appears important in front of strangers. Family is the place that teaches you who you are when everything else disappears. And if you ever cut yourself away from your roots just to stand taller in someone else's world, one day you'll realize too late that roots were the only reason you could stand at all.